Our Belarusian thing too. Belarusian automobile plan.
Come here and you're the king.
And FMCSA themselves admitted that they cannot make connections.
First and foremost, learn English.
Today we want to talk about a very pressing issue for our subscribers, our clients. It's insurance. How critical is insurance for a company? What changes are happening in the insurance industry with the new regulations? And today we have Oleg, an insurance agent, and Al, an insurance broker, as our guests. Hello guys, thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting us.
And so we want to start this conversation. So since I'm not familiar with the insurance industry at all, I want to ask what an insurance agent does and what an insurance broker does. Broker, Oleg, what do you do?
Well, an insurance agent represents the client. In our situation, these are trucking companies. So I look for trucking companies that need insurance and have certain criteria for it. And then there's work with a broker who has contracts with insurance companies. An application is made and they apply for a quote, so to speak.
So you look for companies for clients.
So first and foremost, I am looking for clients. And secondly, when I find clients, we focus on selecting insurance companies for them based on their preferences, needs, and so on.
All right. And Al, what does a broker do?
Well, yes, and accordingly, working with agents, we also have to maintain relationships with various insurance companies. There are hundreds of them in America. Naturally, not only for trucking, as we deal with commercial insurance in general, but in terms of trucking, there are about 70 insurance companies. And we need to maintain relationships with all of them, sign a lot of legal documentation. Then we inevitably always talk to clients because some problem always arises. All problems are complex. They all take a lot of time, and we have to invest quite a bit of time to solve these complex problems. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. As you know, there are a lot of various problems in life and in trucking as well. That's why we're here, as people who know how to solve it. And that's what a broker does from an insurance perspective.
And what about other roles? For example, an underwriter. Who is that? What do they do? What role do they play in this process?
You know, I'm really glad you're asking this because almost none of the brokers are also underwriters. I'm one of the few who is. In other words, I specifically studied for this, obtaining top-level certifications such as CPCU and so on. So when I talk to insurance companies, I speak to them as a colleague because all underwriters and actuaries work in insurance companies. Actuaries are people who work with statistics, while underwriters are those who take all the information from agents and brokers, review it, check how it aligns with their company's internal rules, as well as various laws in the state where they operate, and accordingly decide whether to issue insurance to this company or not. Therefore, a lot depends on the underwriter. And naturally, as in any profession, underwriters prefer to talk to and trust more a person who is like their colleague, who knows what they're talking about and speaks the same language as them. Therefore, of course, by working with us, people get 3-in-1 right away.
Let's put it this way. In this situation, I cooperate with this brokerage because I'm an independent agent. There are captive agents who represent one insurance company. Here, for example, it's like State Farm, so to speak. I can work with any brokerage because in this situation, there are huge advantages as it's a different level, meaning a person within the brokerage is an underwriter themselves. Plus, there is very broad access to insurance resources, meaning practically everything sold on the market is accessible for big companies and small ones, for all types of coatings. So that's a huge plus.
It's very interesting that you're involved in this industry from many sides, as an underwriter, as a broker, and you have access to everything. What sets a good insurance agent apart from other agents? For example, I'm a small company, I have a few trucks, and I've just invested my last money into buying trucks. Now I've set up my MC, got my DOT, and I need insurance for my MC, so I'm kind of shopping around for insurance, and many different insurance agents are calling me. How do I choose someone who is truly professional, who knows what they're doing, and most importantly, who won't deceive me so I won't end up overpaying large sums of money?
Well, first of all, what distinguishes them is an understanding of the industry. For example, we relied on trucking, meaning mainly insurance agents. They just get licensed and know everything from the insurance side. I, for example, once had my own ELD, I had a trucking company, and I understand it much deeper. And the questions that people from the trucking side ask me, which maybe an insurance agent can't always answer, I understand them perfectly, know them, and pay close attention to them.
That's very reassuring. I just know that for insurance agents, it's probably more profitable to find some expensive insurance to get a bigger percentage. How do you deal with that?
It doesn't always work that way, or rather, it never works that way, because when you see expensive insurance, you understand that the chance of selling it is very small. In other words, there's always a desire to find a better and cheaper option. For example, when I see big numbers, I understand that nothing will come of it. Therefore, it's in my interest to go somewhere else, to the second, third, fourth, and improve these numbers.
Just to add, first of all, Oleg made a very correct statement that in our company, what unites all of us, all our agents and brokers, is that in addition to experience in the insurance business, we also have trucking experience. In other words, all of us either owned trucking companies or even have CDL licenses, meaning we really know this business from the inside. And the problem you're talking about is indeed very big. This is one of the main reasons why I, for example, decided to enter this business. When I saw that everywhere around us, so to speak, people were being deceived, I decided that I needed to get into this business. And by leveraging your superior knowledge, your resume, and your contacts, explain to people like, hey, why are you wasting time with these sorts of unclear individuals? Come to us, we'll do everything very well with you. First of all, our service is very fast. Secondly, in your native language, that is in Russian and in other languages. We can also speak in Turkish, in Uzbek. So we are multilingual, even French is available and so on. So yes, different languages, therefore we can provide you with a much higher quality service. We have access to a large number of different insurance companies. And the price, we can just prove to you and show in every way that the price we give you is really a good price. A good price doesn't always mean it will be the cheapest. There's also one point here. Maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but as with everything, you can go buy the cheapest car, but it's probably better not to do that. You can go buy the cheapest refrigerator. It's better not to do that. It'll cost you, yes, to the cheapest safety.
To the cheapest safety, yes, yes, yes.
And then we are not.
Yes, and then you'll end up overpaying. Yes, a penny saved is a penny earned. We don't charge much. We don't set the prices ourselves in the insurance business. There's a bit of a misconception, I think, among many of our people. They think agents and brokers set their own prices and then present them. Yes, such cases may happen, but they are absolutely in the minority. Most brokers and agents don't do such things. They take the price given by the insurance company based on the data they provided. The more data you provide, the more information you give, the better the price will be. When you provide very little information, the underwriter at the insurance company has to fill in these gaps, and naturally they tend to assume the worst case scenario, which makes your price higher. So in the end, it's your own fault if you get a very high price. Our job is to give you a price that makes you our client, and that means it shouldn't be very expensive. It should be a good, fair price that is actually offered. And that's what we strive to do, always with A-rated insurance companies, meaning always good companies. Yes.
And how does it vary? What is an A rating?
Well, A rating, more precisely, there are A plus, and even A plus plus.
Is there a T or F?
There is such a rating, but in such case, if possible, there's not rated.
Is that the worst?
Well, not rated usually means they didn't pay for a rating, but as in any financial market, insurance is essentially a financial product. That is, the insurance business is part of the financial sector. And therefore, almost everyone has a rating. And many brokers who work and provide you with cargo, they won't give you it if your insurance is less than A. So they won't give it to B rated. And unfortunately, some not understanding this buy the cheapest insurance, which is exactly not rated B and so on. And all because they saved that it costs $200 a month. And instead of getting good insurance, they took the cheapest one.
This is very important.
Very important.
I would like to add 2 points regarding the rating and the cost of insurance. As you asked about not rated is sometimes better than C, for example, because not rated means no one knows you yet. Everything seems fine. C means you've already done something wrong, so not rated is not a verdict.
What's the worst rating?
I think something like C.
Yes, it depends on the rating agency. In insurance, there are two main ones. There's AmBest, which is the main one. It's like the gold standard. And there's the silver standard, so to speak, or bronze, as it's better to say. It's Demotech. With Demotech, the worst is an F rating. Well, with that, all roads are closed. Most likely, this company will just be shut down. So those with such a rating, it's a verdict.
How do they make money then with such an insurance?
They mostly close down, really close down. They're in bad shape. Financially, they're in bad shape. It's like with trucking, just like trucking companies, they have a rating from FMCSA. And it's the same in insurance. Everyone strives to get an A rating.
Who gives this rating? The federal government?
No, it's the insurance agencies, the ones specializing in this. AmBest is the main one. Demotech as well as Moody's. Standard and Poor, they do it. The ones that give ratings to financial products, they rate insurance too, but they're not as important. In the insurance industry, brokers actually only pay attention to AmBest. And now they've gradually started paying attention to Demotech.
Yes, Demotech. The first thing an insurance company, some risk retention group that was not rated can get is some kind of B plus rating from Demotech. It always has a plus, but it's always oriented towards AmBest. And regarding the insurance price, I wanted to add, as you asked, what distinguishes a good agent from another. So, first of all, people, of course, look at the price. For example, there is a coverage called physical damage. Physical damage covers the truck in different situations, including theft, for example, and hijacking.
Oleg, I'm sorry to interrupt. I would like you to tell us about all types of insurance briefly later.
Sure, I am just telling you about the price. So I make two quotes. One is more expensive, the other is cheaper. For example, another insurance agent might just sell the cheap quote and that's it. But I explain the difference, for example, in these two quotes. Let's say they ask me, what if my truck gets stolen? Will insurance cover it? So according to the insurance terms, it should cover it. But then there are additional conditions. For example, one insurance covers it in any case, while another only covers it if the truck was stolen from a secured lot where there's video surveillance, where specific gates that are closed and there are two people. So they will be asking you what's what. Someone might cover it, for example. Well, in any case, if you put it on the Chicago site, no one will cover it. But if you put it at a more or less regular truck stop, one insurance will cover it and the other will check if there was surveillance, if there was live security, if there was even a fence, and so on. And any of these discrepancies cause the insurance to deny coverage. Accordingly, I explain all this. What do people choose? Which insurance?
The cheap one.
Unfortunately, our people don't think like that.
Like us?
Because everything else seems fine. Could the truck be stolen? The likelihood of that happening? Accordingly, 90% will choose the cheap insurance, which won't cover if the truck is stolen.
Unfortunately, yes, this is a trend among our people. I've noticed it. And truck thefts are a very common occurrence, actually. And the driver might leave the truck somewhere. And then the police will search for several days. Even with the cargo, there have been such cases. Yes, it's very important. So your task as a good insurance agent is to explain this insurance will cover and this one won't. And insurances, of course, they probably also looking for ways not to pay. That is, to choose any way not to pay out money.
It's business. They look for the maximum opportunity to deny a claim.
And then they wonder why they don't get cargo, why the company didn't pay them when they had a claim, when there was an accident. That is, when they really needed it, they relied on this insurance and it didn't pay them.
So the more of these moments there are, the less likely the coverage.
And no one reads the whole policy. It's sometimes 100 pages. These are commercial policies. Who will read 100 pages in small print in difficult English? Our immigrants, some of whom already have issues with English.
It's not always about that. More often they focus on the price, the cost. And this actually, in this business, just like in your business, is not the first criterion.
As in any business. But you get what you pay for. That's why we don't want to sell anyone a Rolls Royce, Ferrari, and so on. No. We want to sell a Honda, which will get you from point A to point B without any problems. But this Honda, of course, will be more expensive than some Ford Fiesta. Well, it's a little more expensive, but it's better than any other coverage they might take. And many, unfortunately, mostly new immigrants who have been in the US for less than 5 years, they take this thinking nothing will happen. And if it does, I'll quickly fix it myself. I'm so great. I'll pull out the tools, everything. Quick and easy, I'll get it done. But unfortunately, it's not that simple. They all regret it later. But sometimes it's already too late.
And then, yes, after all these explanations, you rightly said that these thefts are quite frequent now, especially since many people have just crossed different borders. Accordingly, now they steal cargo and trucks. So a person who has a physical damage policy calls saying it's not covered. I explain why, what I explained before. And here questions arise why it seems I have physical damage, but in fact you need to pay attention to everything right away, not post factum when it happened, recalling and digging through some emails.
You just need to upload the contract to ChatGPT, translate everything into Russian, and make a summary so you can read 100 pages.
Yes, that will help, of course.
The robot did everything. You read and familiarize yourself.
Or find a good agent who will, that's the best option.
Yes. Or find Oleg and Al. Yes, that's the best, of course. Who will explain everything, tell and show the most important things. Okay, and then if we already started a conversation about prices, everyone wants to know what the prices are now. And I know it depends on many factors.
A lot, yes.
On location, on the zip code. And so what would you say on this topic? Can you name some numbers?
Yes, of course. That is, again, as in any business, since it depends on many factors, it depends, well, primarily, of course, on the location, in which state it is. And then in this state, whether you are in a city, suburb, or some rural area, in rural areas, it's cheaper. In the suburbs, a little more expensive. In the city itself, the most expensive. The cheapest state is Mississippi. But there aren't many of our people there, Russian speaking. There's no community there.
Why?
Well, because it's quite a rural area.
It's a historical trend. Our people are drawn to big cities, to metropolises, to cultural life.
And they are the most expensive. New York, New Jersey, Florida, Illinois, California, Massachusetts are the most expensive states. Ohio is somewhere in the middle. Indiana, Wisconsin is a little cheaper. So very often, many people park in Wisconsin. And the company itself is from Illinois, for example. So such things also happen.
So they look at where you park the truck?
Yes, they look at where you park your truck. Yes. But that's just one of the factors. It's a very important factor, but it's just one of them. They also look, of course, at the condition of the truck itself, its technical condition, how new it is, what model, and so on. And of course, two other most important points. This is where you help. It's about the driver himself. That is, what condition his record is in, how much of a safe driver he is or isn't, and what state the company is in, what his DOT rating is, the so-called basic or safety rating.
I also wanted to add that everything in business should be in match. For example, if you know that Ohio is a cheap state, which was common, what people did, a person who lives in Florida, a Florida resident with a Florida driver's license, would register a business in Ohio and, for example, hire a driver from New York. The fact that Ohio is a cheap state doesn't work here at all, because here the risks are already New York risks, and it's unclear how a Florida owner in Ohio runs the business. So besides understanding which state is cheaper or more expensive, all these things should match as much as possible. At least the business and driver's license or the owner's CDL should be in the same state. Of course, you can hire a driver, but again, if you are, for example, in Illinois, you can justify hiring a driver from Wisconsin or Michigan. But if you're in Illinois and have one driver from Florida and another from New York, then of course the insurance company considers it a different risk, like a New York risk. Because it's clear that the driver won't always park the truck in Ohio and fly to New York. Periodically, he will enter these, as Al said, not rural areas, but these higher risk zones. So there was a massive trend, not now, a couple of years ago, when everyone was registering right. Still, probably, yes, in Ohio, and they still try.
Is Ohio still such a cheap state?
Well, so to speak.
It's kind of in the middle.
You can get an office there and so on, but it doesn't work. That is, if you want everything to be cheap, you have to move to Ohio and at least find one driver from Ohio. And when people are in Miami, there are some trends with investors who don't understand business at all. These investors don't understand at all. They want to be in Miami, but since they came here with money, they want it all to work somehow. And certain companies provide them with services, turnkey businesses. Accordingly, they register the company in Ohio because it's cheap, but they hire a driver from New York because there are much more of them there than anywhere else. And it turns out to be very expensive insurance, if it even works out.
And sometimes it's a complete mess. The company might be registered in Pennsylvania, but its address is moved to Ohio, for example. Yes, he lives in Philadelphia. One driver is in New York, another driver is in California, and a third driver is in Texas.
Yes, and the owner is in Uzbekistan.
That is, other underwriters come and audit their predecessor, their colleague. They uncover such facts and start asking where you park, saying, let's do it this way. One truck is parked in New York, another in California, a third in Texas, and suddenly your price double for insurance. And you're lucky if it ends this way. They might even say, you know what, buddy, goodbye.
Look, do you need only the first driver to be For example, I'm in Ohio. Yes, my company is in Ohio, and I hire one first driver from Ohio, but the rest of the drivers are all over America. So what do the insurance companies look at? This first one?
It's conditional. Ideally, everything should match. Each driver should be from Ohio.
Or the majority. When it's a minority, they close it.
And plus, there's another point. Due to the fact that insurance criteria have significantly tightened, companies are closing, and company owners buy new companies. And the focus is also, for example, on insurance rates. That is, they see that the company is clean, has good safety, pays little for insurance, and then it starts. So they buy it. It seems like a good company. They bought it for a high price, and then it starts. The owner changes. His DL or CDL does not match the state where they were purchased. The drivers, accordingly, are also all theirs. And when you make a quote, people are very surprised how it was like this for him, and here the insurance can grow by 100%. We're not talking about 10%. That is, one paid 10, another was given 20. And he's surprised why? Because all these factors that affect the insurance rate have changed. And people, even those in business, are not oriented in this. That is, they are not oriented on the initial input data, whether the company is clean or not. And when it starts that they are doing business for some investor and he is in Florida, so to speak, everything goes up and so on. And it also depends on the owner. The previous one had a CDL, so he had such a price. And this one just has a driver's license. He just bought the company for himself, wants to do business.
Yes, this is an important distinction, by the way. Those who have a CDL, firstly, have cheaper insurance than people who have regular licenses. That's firstly. And secondly, if you are a company owner and you have a commercial license, then your price will be cheaper than if you had regular licenses, standard licenses. Moreover, there are much more insurance companies I can approach as a broker and try to get you insurance if you have a commercial license. If you have regular licenses, then the number of such companies is very small. And that's also bad. And they know it very well. I mean, the insurance companies, they know that you can't really go anywhere. That is, there are very smart people sitting there. They understand everything perfectly, and the system is made very interestingly.
Okay, then we can return to prices directly to the current prices. For example, if a company is located in Illinois,
Illinois is more expensive, especially everything in Chicago, especially Cook County. Cook County is the most expensive, and many insurers refuse to insure at all if you are in Cook County. The same applies to New York. These 5 boroughs there, it's Manhattan, Queens, Bronx, Brooklyn. It is a refuse. Some refuse from New Jersey, from Massachusetts, from Michigan, from Louisiana.
everyone needs to move to Mississippi.
Yes, and now more and more have started to refuse from Florida and even California. That is, many companies have just started leaving these states. This is something that, by the way, our people also don't really know, that in fact, America is a federation. There are actually 51 or rather even 52 different jurisdictions here. And insurance,
Is it working out with Puerto Rico?
from Puerto Rico, yes, yes. And insurance in principle is regulated at the state level, not so much at the federal level. And therefore, there are very big differences depending on the state.
And in terms of money, let's go back. If I have, for example, one truck, let's imagine I have 5 trucks. I had been working and now I want to renew the insurance. And what are the current prices in Illinois?
Let's say if you work with AIST, you have clean, good record, and you've been in business for several years, for example, at least 2 years, and you need at a minimum auto liability for $1 million and motor truck cargo for example, $100,000, then you will most likely be able to find insurance here in Illinois for about $15,000 per truck.
I had a figure in my head.
Approximately.
It's kind of an average.
It's a weighted average. No, it's a good price. It could be cheaper. There are many factors. If the driver, for example, is older, their insurance will be cheaper just because of the older age.
Not exactly.
For example, many of our clients don't hire drivers who are 65.
Well, 65 is a lot because many don't insure them. But the best drivers from an insurance perspective are those who are 45 and older, from 45 to 60. They will have the cheapest rates.
And what about the youngest age?
The youngest age now, some states allow 18 years, some 21. But in reality, you pay a lot for insurance until you're 25. So yes, we often have clients where, for example, a father wants to add his son. The son is, say, 24 and a half years old. We give him a quote, and his eyes pop out like, what's this? Why am I paying 15,000 roughly speaking? And why are you charging my son 25,000? Because he's not 25 yet. And in insurance, everything is clear. All statistics, they just input into the computer the person's birth date. He's under 25, so they have to charge him fully because statistically, he's more likely to get into several accidents.
You mentioned 18 years. 18 is for drivers who don't go beyond the state, right?
Yes.
For them, it's probably the most, let's say, risky group. From 18 to 25 is the most dangerous group.
The most dangerous, the most difficult to get insurance for them. Of course.
Young people who are practically still children.
Plus, each insurance company has its own restrictions, meaning some insurance companies won't take anyone under 25 at all. So it's not like there's a federal law of 18, 21, or 23. Some won't take anyone under 25, some won't take anyone under 23. So it depends on the insurance carrier, the insurance company, and the states.
We're talking about liability. About the main one,
Anyone, usually. Any insurance, yes, they have similar criteria, sorry. Similar criteria for all types of insurance in terms of fundamental factors like age.
so even for cargo insurance.
Even for cargo, such restrictions can exist.
Well, liability is still a limiting factor because there's no cargo without liability. If you're not accepted for liability, then passing for cargo doesn't matter.
And if you could maybe briefly list the insurances. I know some of our clients are like, oh, this insurance, for example, physical damage, it's not mandatory. I paid for my truck, so I won't take it. And if you could, for example, go over the insurances that are mandatory by federal rules and those that are not mandatory but highly recommended.
Are there types that, let's say, are mandatory in specific state?
It's complicated. Of course. Especially in Florida, in Illinois, in New York. It's the same type of insurance, but it has a specific subtype that they additionally require. The main thing, as Oleg said, is auto liability. It's called differently. It's called commercial auto liability. It's called primary liability. In fact, it's the main responsibility, yes, and it's the most important type of insurance.
And it goes up to $1 million, right?
So 750 is the minimum required for a heavy truck, class 8 usually. Those heavy trucks that drive class 7, class 8, they require a minimum of 750,000. But in reality, with minimal insurance, you won't get any cargo. Practically no broker, well, 97% of brokers won't give you any cargo. That's why everyone takes $1 million. $1 million is actually the minimum you need. You can buy more. For example, in New Jersey, you are required to have $1.5 million. It's mandatory in this state. It's the first state to require this. If you're transporting heavy hazmat like explosives, you need to have 5 million.
That's class 6, right? Liquid gases?
Yes. The heaviest and first class, especially explosive like cartridges, military equipment. It's interesting that gasoline is considered enough with just 1 million to operate these tankers for only $1 million. But this is done for political reasons. It's clear why it's done this way, for political economic reasons, because it's simply impossible. A 5 million insurance. Firstly, there are very few carriers capable of even providing such insurance. And then paying for it is much more expensive, several times more expensive, and no one would be able to, and then all the gas stations in the country would just close. So for purely political reasons, they allow it. That's why liability is the most important, the most difficult type of insurance to get. And it's what activates your so-called MC number, although the MC number no longer exists since October 1st. Now it's only the DOT number, so that's a thing of the past. So the second main type is motor truck cargo. And you need at least $100,000. It's also considered mandatory, actually, if you're transporting cargo, if you have a trailer. These are the two mandatory ones. Many of our people, especially immigrants from the former Soviet Union, from Eastern Europe, limit themselves to just these two types of insurance. Of course, they're playing a kind of roulette, so to speak. It's definitely not enough. It's definitely not enough. Physical damage is, of course, a good type of insurance to take. It's usually determined as a percentage of the value of your truck and trailer. And major companies like Progressive, and Progressive is the largest insurance company, for example, the number 2 company is 3 times smaller than Progressive. So to give you an idea, yes, it's a huge company. Progressive with an online operator can take more than 10% of the cost of your truck and trailer. And when you have a fleet, they'll take 3 to 4%. And when it's a large fleet, they'll take just 1%. So there's a big difference because Like in any business, the more you buy, the more discount you get, as with everything. So often people are surprised, why is it 10 here and 4 there? What kind of ripoff is this? No, it's like that with everything. Whatever you buy, when you go to the Costco, the more you buy, the more discount you get. It's cheaper than if you bought at Whole Foods. So it's the same everywhere.
We had a question about progressive.
And also about other types of insurance.
I wanted to add about these three types of insurance to provide clarity because clients often don't understand what physical damage is. Auto liability is when your liability to someone else is insured. If something happens,
So with a third party, right?
this insurance covers third-party liability. Cargo insurance covers your cargo. But many don't realize that auto liability doesn't cover their truck. They think that if they have it, especially if their owner-operator has it when they work for a company, they are protected from everything. But that's not the case. In fact, it's important to have physical damage insurance because this insurance covers you and your truck in case something happens. I mean, specifically the iron.
So bobtail, right? Dump truck?
Not bobtail, just the truck and trailer itself. Bobtail is a separate type of insurance, which we will definitely explain. There are two types. There's bobtail, and it's sometimes confused with non-trucking liability, NTL. They are indeed very similar, very similar. So if you have one type and not the other, that's okay. And vice versa, right? You can buy bobtail, you can buy non-trucking liability.
And it's very easy to prove because there are hours of service. They show when you are on duty, when off duty, personal time.
Personal conveyance.
Yes, personal conveyance, yes. And therefore, it's very easy to prove now.
And if they don't have this type of insurance, either bobtail or non-trucking liability, and something happens, an accident, the insurance won't cover it. Because auto liability insurance will say you were not on the clock, you were not performing an official business function. You'll say, no, I was actually going there on work matters. I was going to some client. They'll say, oh, okay, give us your logs. Let's see. You have personal conveyance here.
So do we need additional insurance?
Yes, additional insurance.
How much insurance is needed for each truck and each driver?
I would like to emphasize this point when the truck is not working because many do not understand this. They operate with the concept of, for example, physical damage, bobtail. But the point is, if it's an owner-operator, a very important thing is that people just refuse to arrange it to save $300 to $400 a year. This is non-trucking liability. Because you need to understand that if you go to Walmart on the weekend in your truck, for example, your auto liability doesn't work. That's what non-trucking liability is for, which covers you when you drive your truck outside of working hours.
So personal conveyance, for example, is also included, right?
Any off-duty time when you don't have your cargo or you're driving without a trailer, for example. If you don't have a trailer, then you need bobtail.
If you have a trailer, non-trucking liability, NTL.
If you're not driving, if you're off duty and your truck is parked,
The same thing. Yes, the same rules will be applied. They will look at all of this because insurance companies, they start negotiating among themselves, analyzing and kind of naturally each insurance company tries to say, no, it wasn't my responsibility. You should pay for it.
To shift it onto someone else?
Yes, yes, yes. And that's why now they have many different things like hours of service, cameras, and so on. So it's much easier for them to prove it now. Who should pay than it was 10 years ago, for example, when we still had our own trucking companies and so on.
So you mentioned cameras, right? So when companies have cameras, those dash cams, does that mean the insurance rate is lower?
Usually, yes, of course, of course. Usually they are lower. And most importantly, I generally recommend everyone to have these cameras, even dual cameras, because they look both inside at the driver and outside.
And how deeply do they look inside at the driver?
Many of them look, first of all, in infrared mode, and they automatically block everything. They look at the face. More precisely, they only need to see the person's lips and eyes. That's the most important thing. They are absolutely not interested in seeing what a person does in their bed. Everyone is afraid. Absolutely. The University of Michigan conducted a study a few years ago. They did research, the largest study, and they found that when an accident occurs between a truck and a regular car, in 80% of cases, the car is at fault, not the truck. That is, the truck is only at fault in 20% of cases. But if you get into an accident, you're a trucker, and you get into an accident with a regular car, almost always the lawyers on the other side will try to sue you, and you will lose that case because the jury will side with the poor person who may have crashed into you themselves. That's very often. And only if you have a camera will it save you. And this happens all the time, constantly. All my clients always thank me later saying, Al, thank you so much. Really, listen, all the expenses paid off with just this one accident because of the camera. Because here's the footage. I even started collecting from many people their footage, this tape to show it later. I mean, there are incredible, simply incredible stories. People get arrested, truckers are arrested right on the spot by the police. And only when the fleet owner, at that moment, because they have a camera, sends this to the police saying, look, my driver is not at fault, only then are they released. So it's very important to have, very important. And that's why we always tell everyone that safety is the most important thing in the trucking business. And if you don't pay attention to this, you will regret it very much. Therefore, always pay great attention to safety. Cameras are one of the components.
Yes, and cameras, that is
I completely agree. Safety is the heart of a trucking company. And you noted that courts usually rule that the trucking company is at fault. Why is that? Is it because trucks drive a lot and get tired, according to statistics?
not quite. In America, they go after the money.
For the money.
So if it's a trucking company, then by definition, it's a wealthy owner and an expensive high-end business. Accordingly, there is such a stigma in society, and therefore, when there are any lawsuits, they will, of course, go after the trucking companies first. And regarding cameras, it should also be added that they should not just be dash cams, but serious professional cameras that record to the cloud. That's a big difference. And plus, it's always a plus for you, even if you, for example, are at fault, because it's your case, it's your material, your cameras. If you see that you want to use this video, you use it.
And in 80% of cases, you will need to use it.
And this is a very important question because our clients constantly have these kinds of accidents and they just get so ridiculous that they call us that the accident just happened, the police don't even know yet, and they call us and they say, oh, our lookbooks are all wrong and the police are coming and what should we do? Should we provide these dashcam recordings and the lookbooks to the police?
Or is there some way? We, of course, say, yes, of course, provide everything according to the law and so on. But does the company have the option not to provide the dashcam?
I would say that lookbooks are mandatory, that is, they must be provided. As for the camera, if your insurance company has not made it a requirement that you must always use it, and the insurance must have access, if not, then it's your choice. You set up the camera, in the end, it's your choice, in my opinion. If you see that the situation is not in your favor, in my opinion, I wouldn't provide it either.
Your company's safety department should handle this, along with your lawyers and consultants. In this case, if AIST works with trucking companies, it would be better for you to review and decide. But again, in 80% of cases, it will definitely be in your favor, so it's better to show it. But in any case, it's better to first look at it yourself, review everything, analyze, and then act according to the situation.
What if it's a fatality, for example?
Then this camera will definitely help you. I just want to add here that in America, and generally in the courts and jurisprudence, there is a very big problem right now. It's what's called a nuclear verdict. This is when juries deliver verdicts of more than $10 million. And there are more and more of them. Now, it's reached a point where, for example, in Florida, a couple of years ago, there was a verdict for $1 billion. And naturally, it was a trucking company, and the driver was Russian speaking, fled the scene, and so on. So it was a very difficult situation. Having cameras, even if your insurance doesn't give you any preferences for it or doesn't require it from you, install cameras. This is very important. And all drivers must also understand that this will protect you. Because if something happens, everyone will be held responsible, including the driver, the fleet owner, and everyone else. They know that most trucking companies behave unprofessionally, meaning they don't work with professional consultants, safety, have unprofessional brokers, agents, and so on. They know it's easy to get money from them. That's why they will go after you. And only if they see that everything is clear, correct, well done, all papers are in order, logbooks are in order, when you have cameras, you have this whole protective chain built, only then will they be left with nothing.
Yes, we tell our clients the same thing because when they hire a driver and the file is incomplete, for example, they say, well, it's no big deal, it's just paperwork. This paperwork can later come up in court and the judge will look at how properly you hired the driver. The insurance will suffer, your money will suffer, and there will be huge damages. And coming back to this damage to the company, we had a question. Andre, do you remember one of our subscribers asked us about $1 million?
Yes, a subscriber on Telegram asked whether there have been cases of $1 million plus MC liability claims that resulted in liens on personal property.
It's what I'll just explain. There were different cases, and there are already claims over 10 million.
Does it extend to personal property as well, or does it depend on how the company is structured?
Exactly. There are many other specific legal nuances. If the driver, first of all, doesn't work for a company and is transporting under his own name, it's absolutely the easiest to go after such a person. Second, people create LLCs, for example, limited liability company, but they are single member LLC, for example. This is the second in terms of the least complexity.
If the company was set up improperly, right?
Either it's improperly set up or it's set up correctly, but there's only one person in it. And accordingly, the lawyer on the other side claims it's not a real company. It's what's called a shell company, so we can pierce the veil, as it's called, meaning we will break through that umbrella. Therefore, the best are, first of all, properly set up companies. They should have operating agreements. They should have minutes done every year. For example, here in Illinois, it's mandatory by state law that every company must prepare their minutes every year. I'm more than 100% sure that 99.9% of companies don't do this. And that's a big problem. And the second problem, by the way, is that most people don't check their drivers' MVRs at least once a year. We're always surprised by this because potential clients come to me and, like they send everything, like IFTAs, loss runs. Yes, they send everything, CDLs, copies, and so on. We say, okay, guys, but can you send the MVRs? Oh, we don't do MVRs. We don't check that. The agent does it themselves. I ask them, what do you mean? Do you not have safety since you don't check these? Do you understand that if you get into an accident and the other party's attorney finds out you don't have a document showing you check these every year, you'll be considered reckless? And when they show that you are not just negligent but reckless, they can easily break through your protective umbrella and go after your house and all your personal assets. So everything needs to be organized properly. That's first. And second, if possible, of course, buy access insurance or umbrella insurance. That is, it goes over $1 million. You can easily buy up to 5 million and even up to 15 million. In some cases, depending on the company, their MVR record and so on, you can go up to 25 million. Well, for most, of course, it's not necessary. Although large fleets, there are many large fleets in Chicago with 500 to 600 trucks. I would advise such people to buy these kinds of insurance. It's actually not expensive. No. If they work with AIST and have good safety, then they will pay about $5,000 for each million of coverage, over 1 million. So actually, it's quite reasonable to pay for peace of mind.
At least the house will be saved.
Everything will be completely saved then, of course. The main thing is you'll have another insurance company behind you. And insurance companies, in fact, do two things. They do them very well. The first is statistics. These are people who deal with statistics all day long. That's the first. Second, they are essentially a law firm. Or rather, they work with the best lawyers in the city, in this jurisdiction. And therefore, having such a powerful company behind you that will help you. And what is it? Liability insurance. You protect yourself against lawsuits. That's it. That's why you buy it.
They're on your side, so to speak.
They're on your side. They will now help you. You won't be running around trying to find some lawyer. A special lawyer will come to you from day one who knows trucking and insurance perfectly and knows all the lawyers attacking them from the other side. That is, their colleagues. And therefore, it will be much easier for them to protect you. You'll be in good hands.
They play golf together.
Of course. They smoke cigars, drink whiskey, and decide how they'll divide the world, how they'll divide it.
Insurance money. Now, going back a bit to the things that insurance companies and underwriters look at. We've already discussed many locations, all drivers, age, safety rating. Are there any additional practices? For example, sometimes we've encountered the practice where an insurance company audits its own company.
Of course.
Or, for example, they require training, and often it's not just any training for drivers on safety, but specifically from this company. Are these common practices?
Yes. To get a quota, you often need additional things related to how safety is managed in the company, how maintenance records are kept, and what technological tools are used, like cameras, trackers, and so on. This is always one of the questions. Well, for an existing company, when the company is new, obviously not. But when a company is operating and changing insurance, this is a constant question from underwriters. An additional question is, what is being done in the company to improve safety in the first place?
Of course, if you want the lowest price, you must have various training manuals, driver manual. You need to show a lot of different information and demonstrate that everything is in order, that you have this safety culture, and that you are constantly proactively managing it. Unfortunately, many do not know this, do not understand, do not pay attention. They don't call you, they take something from the internet.
We always recommend you. For some reason, they don't call.
Yes.
Probably expensive.
We explained the difference between expensive and cheap. Now they will start calling.
Actually, it's even worse now because ChatGPT has appeared and suddenly everyone has become doctors of science. Overnight, everyone has turned into very smart people and goes around saying things. Hey, ChatGPT, write me a safety manual. It's just terrible. They don't understand what it's even writing, and these systems often hallucinate. They make many mistakes. Yes, of course. Everything there can be completely wrong. It's not verified, and then they send it. And it becomes their DOT, so to speak, manual, because DOT checks them. They require the same usual information.
Some insurers require such things. Not all, but some do. And of course, much also depends on the cargo. If you transport hazmat, then you will be required to have all these documents without fail. There's a whole list of different documents. And if you transport simple dry freight, general freight, then of course there are fewer requirements for you.
And how do we do it? That is, we have a whole range of these policies. And besides having all sorts of rules, regulations, and policies, company rules on safety, we also require that all this is actually implemented.
Not just on paper, but that drivers do it.
And then we also conduct driver training. That is, every time a driver gets a violation, we make them undergo training, we talk to them, advise them, watch videos, and so on. And then we give all this to the insurance. That is, these are real driver certificates. Real drivers go through it. It's not just some empty paper. Our clients, they then give it to the insurance. And especially all this happens before the renewal. We accumulate all this during the year. Well, they have such a big panic before the insurance renewal. We say, don't worry, we have everything. We've accumulated everything over the year. We do our job. It really helps.
Of course.
What we do on our side for the insurance company before renewal, if there is some time left, a few months, and we see that some safety things can be improved, we accordingly recommend the company AIST safety because it really affects the quota. In other words, if it's possible to knock out some tickets or somehow improve this accumulated negative information, if we have time, we usually do it 3 months in advance. And it really helps. That is, if the company listens, it really affects the rate in the future.
Very often, by the way, it is required the biography of the safety director from the company. Very often.
I have a question. Many companies have now learned to manipulate miles, for example. If, for example, a company has 20 trucks, they make it seem like they have 60 trucks, manipulating the number of miles to lower their safety score. This happens. And they say, oh, here's the insurance. There will be big problems with the insurance. If the miles are incorrectly indicated, for example, on the federal portal, does it somehow affect the insurance or, for example, the number of trucks they don't have, which they indicate?
Well, it's a direct influence, especially the number.
Insurance fraud or what?
Potentially, yes. And especially the number of trucks. If you have a scheduled policy like most do, then they'll just say, wait, how did you give me a list of 20 VINs, but you have 60 listed in the FMCSA, and indeed you have that number of miles? First, give me your IFTAs, and second, give me your other logs. Then we'll look at inspections, because indeed these VIN numbers don't match. You had some other trucks you didn't give us. What happened to them? So you have to explain a lot, and in the end, they're smart people. Either they naturally then refuse the insurance, or they give it at a very high price. Plus, many people don't know things like the utilization factor. That's exactly what they get caught on. So they think, oh, we're so shrewd, we'll change the number, especially for Amazon, the number of trucks. And they won't notice, they don't know that the utilization factor also changes, and they can be caught like that. And it was created to catch exactly that.
And here's a question, if the insurance is refused. Now, for example, some trucks are driving that are not insured, the insurance discovers this violation and says, that's it, guys, you're constantly deceiving us, we won't insure these trucks anymore and won't renew anything with you at all. So does this somehow connected with other insurance companies? If one insurance refuses, does it mean other insurances also refuse?
They always ask for the reason for cancellation. There are different levels of violations. One thing is that you didn't pay the bill. Another thing is that you have an unlisted truck. And of course, if you have, by the way, this is a document that is always required for a quota. They ask for a notice of cancellation with the reason of cancellation. If it says unlisted vehicle, then of course it's not a doom. You can get insurance, but it's already limited to the number of carriers, and accordingly, it seriously affects the rate. And we're not saying it will be cheap.
It will be expensive, but still someone will work with you.
There are such carriers, yes, who specialize in such things. But their insurance, just so you understand, for example, if we're talking about a number, we mentioned 15. In this situation, it will be from 30 per truck. So then it's your choice. Do you want to earn money just for the insurance, or do you want to come up with something else in life?
Yes, it's very expensive.
And there's also, I've heard, such insurances as government insurance. So when no company insures you anymore because you've been very naughty, some government insurance kicks in and covers for a while. But then when insurance companies find out about this government insurance or federal insurance and they say,
It's called state risk.
then we won't, because you've already worked with this state insurance, we won't work with you anymore. Is there such a thing?
Well, I'll say right away, yes, we're not big fans of state pools. We are often approached, by the way, we ourselves do not work with state pools for principled reasons. It's a lot of red tape. We just don't want to deal with it. It's a huge waste of time.
those trucking companies, let's be open, that end up there. They end up there for the reasons we've just talked about. If they haven't listened to our advice for several years, they've shown they're incapable and unwilling to listen. We don't want to work with them then because it's just a headache, because they will never be satisfied. They will always ask why is this like that? Why is it this way? And so on. It's better not to work with them. It's better to work with companies that understand everything and want to improve. Because really, guys, it's a big risk in trucking. It's a huge risk. First of all, you're driving an 80,000-pound vehicle. It's like a rocket on wheels. God forbid something happens. I've already mentioned that there could be $1 billion claim and you'll just lose everything. For what? Why take such a risk? Do everything properly. Install cameras, work with safety, check the MVRs, prepare all the documents, train your drivers. Don't hire just anyone. If someone lacks experience, train them more. The less headache you have, the better your quality of life will be. That's why we prefer not to work with the state pool, and it really narrows down the number of insurances you can get later. And in general, it's become very difficult to get state pools now, especially here in Illinois. It's become very difficult.
Because there are many companies.
A couple of points. Yes. Answering the question, after a state pool, you can get insurance. So it's not like if you had a state pool, you won't get it. But the state pool has certain features that people use, which is why they liked it. So the state pool is actually not cheap insurance. Per unit scheduled policy is expensive. It's above the average market price. But with the state pool, since it's the government, it's easy to manipulate. And that's why those who use the state pool did so, because they somehow used this insurance and its flexibility in terms of manipulation. But now all these criteria are becoming very strict. So now people are massively leaving the state pools because they can't do the things they did, for example, 2 years ago, because now there's more attention to this. Audits are happening, and you don't get the benefits from state pools that you did, say, a couple of years ago when everyone was rushing to these state pools.
Was it easier to manipulate because the government didn't check as much?
The bureaucratic apparatus?
In state pools, there was a story where people paid for a certain number of trucks, but much more were actually driving. It was much easier to do there than, for example, in other traditional carriers.
They're checking now.
Now, everything has changed, but that's how it was before, and people really liked it.
I think we have enough material for at least 10 more podcasts. And before we move on to one of the main topics, I have a couple of specific questions. One came up when Al mentioned non-preventable crashes, how important it is to file them. Let's say a crash happened relatively recently, and we all know that when we file a non-preventable crash, the review process takes at least 3 months, maybe 6 months or longer, depending on the circumstances. If we provide, for example, all the evidence, here was this crash, we filed it, here's our evidence, does it help with renewal?
It can help, yes, it can help with renewal. Each underwriter in large companies has a certain right to such a human factor. So they can say, we understand what our system tells us, and the score from the centralized system says it's very bad for this company, but we make an exception. Underwriter's exception at his discretion. This can happen. Therefore, the more data in general, when they, thousands of companies go through them every year, everyone comes wanting insurance, especially with liability. That is, the demand is much greater than the supply, much greater. And 1,000 companies come in a year. There are usually very few underwriters, well, except for large companies like Progressive. Most companies are poorly prepared. And then comes a company where everything is well structured. Of course, they will treat you much better. They will see that the guys are professionals. Clearly, everything is fine there. Therefore, I think they can be given an exception.
And they'll accept people like that?
Of course, because any underwriter wants to have some data in writing so that later, if, for example, something doesn't happen, doesn't work out, when their supervisor checks, and they are always checked, they can say, well, look, what a folder they gave. Look here. It's fine. I did this within my underwriter exception. And the supervisor will agree with them that, okay, yes, indeed, everything is documented here. Clearly, a professional company, well, they just got unlucky, let's say. That's why. Because insurance companies also know perfectly well that the DOT goes overboard. Everyone knows that they behave very aggressively, especially towards immigrants. So this is also well known to everyone.
That's what we wanted to address. And before that, the last question from our subscribers on Telegram. It would be interesting to know about insuring drivers with less than 2 years of experience. And Progressive is mentioned here. Are there any other companies besides Progressive that take drivers with less than 2 years of experience? Especially if the CDL experience is less than a year. And what are the nuances? What are the conditions?
Of course there are. There are companies, but in total there are less than a dozen Therefore, your number of companies is significantly reduced. They are not in all states, by the way, so it depends on the state. In some state, Progressive may be the only company, for example. And in some states, there may be a wider choice. Therefore, of course, it's better when you have, well, at least more than a year of experience, best when more than 2 years.
But there are companies that take a year plus. But what we talked about, for example, about ratings, often it's a not rated companies, which is a risk retention group. They accept drivers from a year. There are companies that are A rates, and that will take a driver with less than a year, but we are talking about completely different rates. That is, we are not talking about 15, but about 20 plus, because if you have already declared such a thing, then these are completely different prices. That is, there are such carriers that are oriented towards this, but again, it's even 25,000 plus per unit.
Well, of course. And that's fair. Our people should understand this too. Put yourself in the place of an insurance company. A new company comes to you, new venture, that's one. Two, a new driver comes in who has less than 2 years, sometimes even less than a year of experience. And what rate would you give them? It's clear that they have less experience, so accordingly, they need to be given a higher price.
And how long do you need to be in business to get a good rate?
More than 3 years.
Well, if it's a traditional carrier, that is, if you go, for example, not to Progressive, not to Geico, but Progressive in principle can give you a good rate right away because you need to separate two things, how conditionally speaking Progressive evaluates you and a traditional carrier does. Carriers evaluate the business. What you said is correct, that the longer in business, the better the rate. Progressive, when it's a new business that is a traditional carrier, is unlikely to give you insurance. What does Progressive do? It understands that you are starting a business, that you have no records, no safety record, nothing. They evaluate you as a borrower of money, like a traditional bank. In this situation, the owner as a person is very important, meaning their personal history, their credit score, and their criminal history. Why is Progressive so widely used now, especially for companies that are just starting out? Because there is no business yet, but there is a person who wants to do it. And Progressive evaluates a person as if they are giving them a loan. And basically, you can get a good rate on Progressive without being in business at all. That is, a person who has been in business for 3 years might have a worse rate because they ran the business incorrectly. But a person who is just entering this business, since they have a good, long, and correct background in America, might have a lower rate.
So they look at the criminal background, right?
Well, they have their own databases, let's say, but they evaluate the person as a whole, credit score, background. And of course, the driver is important. So if you put the right driver, for example, with experience and no violations, and you have a good biography in America, the rate might be cheaper than a company with a lot of experience that ran the business improperly.
Are there any other insurance options besides this big monopoly, Progressive?
Well, Geico entered the market recently, about a year and a half ago.
Besides these two, Geico and Progressive, or are these the two giants?
These are the two largest, yes. All others are much smaller, and it depends on the situation, the state, and other criteria.
Is it better to work with them or what?
Or it's not necessarily better with them. They are the very first companies. That is, for the first 1 or 2 years, you work with them, but then as you grow, you need different coverage. Honestly, you won't be able to develop your business with these two companies, for example. For example, if you want to do intermodal, you won't be able to. If you want to do hazmat, you won't be able to.
And we won't be able to because the rates will be high.
No, because they just refuse. They just won't give it to you. Also, they are not in all states. Geico, for example, is not in all states. There is in Illinois, but if you are in North Carolina, there isn't. For example, they are not in New York.
For those who don't know what intermodal is, it's a container.
Container transport is usually by railway.
Which is very popular here in Chicago because of the presence of BNSF.
We have a lot of railroads.
The summary is that you need to separate these two concepts, a starting business and a business that is already, as you said, 2 to 3 years old. So for a starting business, Progressive and Geico are the two options that probably cover 90% of the market. Of course, when you grow to a certain number of trucks, plus you have a certain record in business, plus you have good drivers, well, of course, you move away from these companies to traditional carriers that evaluate you as a business.
So, roughly speaking, if I open a company, I have to overpay for insurance for 3 years, meaning I won't have such great rates, meaning I won't get them if everything is in order. I have a good zip code. I'm in a suburb where there are rural roads. Everything matches the driver's CDL, my CDL, and so on.
Everyone is from one state.
will be the price will be good.
Anastasia, what I said, if you are the right person and everything matches, then for a startup business, the price might be.
But I'm just starting.
You're just starting, it doesn't matter. That's what I said. They evaluate you as a person, your background. Plus, if everything matches, you and the driver are in Illinois. Well, let's say you and the driver are from Ohio.
But in 3 years, it will be even better for me.
It will. Yes, it depends on the state. For example, if you are in the state of Georgia, then 5 years.
5 years, I heard Georgia is very aggressive.
In fact, if the business doesn't develop so rapidly, let's say, then you can be with Progressive for 3 to 5 years. It depends on what kind of business it is and how someone wants to build it. For example, if you want to start a business and you understand that in the first year you'll have 3 trucks, in the second year 5 trucks, in 3 years 7, then with Progressive it may be even 10 years and you'll have everything cheaper than other companies. But if we take, so to speak, our post-Soviet model, where they want to have 20 trucks by the end of the first year, then of course people quickly move to other carriers because Progressive's and Geico's restrictions don't allow for such growth.
I was just about to ask why insurance companies don't like it.
Because it's a business risk. Insurance companies assess risks, it's statistics. Logically speaking, if you have 1 truck and you want to move gradually, in 6 months a second truck, in another 6 months a third truck, that's one risk. When you acquire 5 trucks and 5 drivers in 3 months, the business operates completely differently. It becomes a higher risk entity. Accordingly, many companies in such a situation simply send a cancellation. We're talking about Progressive, for example, if you started with them. So they don't like rapid growth. There's such a concept as stability. You have 1 truck, 1 driver, a second truck, a second driver. That's one stable business. They both drive and that's it. If you start adding trucks, adding drivers, then a driver leaves, you remove a truck, hire a new driver, find a new truck. That's not a stable business. That's a risk factor. Accordingly, all this affects the quotas and your further relations with the insurance company.
And in addition, I want to say there's a third reason, the so-called chameleons in business. They're afraid of how you suddenly grew, how you doubled in size in 1 year. Where did these trucks come from? Apparently, you closed some old worn-out company with bad safety records and decided to move here, being so cunning. And very often that's exactly the case. It's exactly from this category, it's called chameleons.
In such cases, do they compare everything?
They compare everything, they look at everything. And if you're labeled a chameleon, then as a business order, so to speak, you won't be given insurance anymore. Because there's a central database where all insurance companies, they look, share, and each has a certain score. Each company.
So they look at all the truck numbers, right? So if a large number of trucks moved from one company to another, it's very easy to notice. So if I have 50 trucks?
Trucks, they look at everything. They look at addresses, emails, fax numbers, everything. They look at owners. They look at driver's licenses. They look at many different indicators. They have learned to be more, it used to be very primitive. If it's the same address, then it's a chameleon. Now they look at everything more nuanced.
So from 50 to 200 trucks, I won't be able to grow in 2 years?
Well, you can. Here, by working with the right broker, you can do it.
A broker who will find the right carrier.
Is 2 years still an acceptable time?
Time, it's possible. There are cases where this happens even in the first year. There are such cases, if I can explain it correctly. I can explain it correctly if you're honest with me and give me all the information I ask from you. Don't keep secrets. I'm on your side. I'm trying to show the insurance companies that, guys, this is not a chameleon. They're not avoiding or running from anything. Everything is transparent. Everything is open. The person just decided to invest in this business.
So yes, there are logical explanations for this. A person had, for example, a strong business, a good 50 trucks. They found an investor. Why can't the investor buy, let's say, another 50 trucks? But it needs to be explained that this person is the first. They can handle it, for example. Or the second one, the investor also has experience in trucking. So these things are all explainable. In any case, we will do it. I don't know if anyone else can help with,
I have no doubt.
but we will definitely help.
Yes, because we have these calls and people have an incredible amount of money. We don't ask where it's from, but they urgently need to buy a lot of trucks or, as you say, chameleons, but we also try to be against this sort of. But it happens that the company, for some reason, completely went bankrupt and they need, usually it's safety. They only come to us when everything is bad or when they want to start over. So they say we have 50, 40, 60, 100 drivers on the base. Find us an insurance agent.
There are logical explanations that underwriters accept. You just need to properly fill out the application. For this, you need the right agent and the right broker, who is also an underwriter in their brokerage company, understands how to submit the application. Because there are things that are explainable. Rapid growth, for example, is not a sentence. Let's say if you had 50 trucks, you already understand the business. It's hard, for example, let's say there's a difference between operating 1 truck or 10. But when it's 50, the principles are the same. It's easy to explain that you can take on 100 trucks and everything will be just as good. If everything was good for you before,
Well, yes. So you already have a team formed, just adding people to these.
Well, of course, yes, yes, yes. Well, the same principles as in any business. In any business, it's like that. So everyone looks at experience, the experience of the owner, the experience of the employees who work. They require, as I often say, a biography, resume, CV, and so on. When they look at this, they sometimes check themselves, go to LinkedIn, go to the company's website, and so on. So there are many factors.
Yes, we have such clients who their survival rate, I don't know, 100 out of 100, that is, they go bankrupt 100%, then they recover under other names, send us some other companies and so on.
It never ends. They never give up. So they keep going and going and going.
They get shut down and they come back again. DOT shuts them down and they don't get insurance. And there are many other reasons, yet they still survive. There are many resilient, interesting people who keep businesses going and going.
start and start. We help such people too. Moreover, we probably have the majority of them because from the post-Soviet space, business methods are approximately the same. And very often it comes down to everything happening very quickly in one direction.
Then in another, our people are impatient. First of all, they call us at the last minute. They call you at the last minute. We tell them, well, guys, you should have called at least a month, at least 30 days before. But how can you call 2 days before cancellation?
It's very important that this is done in advance so people understand what's coming, or, for example, contact the right agents and brokers who can help right away and not wait for something with someone who will drag out time. And in the end, call the right people a week in advance.
Because you can't turn back time and you lose the company.
This is the most important thing.
And the company, if there is no insurance for some time, for example, there are such terrible cases when the company had insurance, they did a renewal, but the agent might not have filed it on time for some reason. Maybe it's a small insurance company. We had a case like this, not Progressive, not Geico. I don't know what happened there, but it wasn't filed on time. There was an update on the FMCSA portal and there was a pause in the insurance. The pause was brief, literally 3 days, but because of this pause, the company completely lost its history and was reset for brokers.
So brokers already look at it as a new company, even though the company.
For some, yes. For Amazon, for example, it is so and so on, yes.
Unfortunately, it is so, but it does matter a lot.
Fortunately, not for everyone.
Not for everyone.
Even one day of gap, it's very bad. So these moments need to be avoided, especially if you have contracts with some serious companies. Well, Amazon is the simplest thing, but there are other organizations with which there are contracts, and these gaps, they seriously affect, so to speak.
Yes, Amazon in general is very passive aggressive. They have their own rules, their own safety scale besides DOT.
Okay, I think then we should have started with this topic, but we can now, as this is the main topic that literally interests everyone right now, new rules. So on September 29th, this emergency law came into effect about non-domiciled drivers, poor, unfortunate ones who are now losing their jobs and who are afraid to work and so on. So from the perspective of your field, what changes will there be?
Well, for now, let's say with such a driver's license, we can get a quota. Insurance companies, they give a quota to such a driver for now because the law has not yet been adopted. This is called an emergency regulation.
Non-domiciled?
Yes, that's exactly it. There is no strict law that currently imposes any restriction.
This is not a federal law, it's just a regulation for now.
Backup plan? So they did it as a regulation for now?
This is a regulation from the FMCSA, and it's still an interim final, meaning temporary, as the full version hasn't been adopted yet.
But now the DOT, the federal authorities, are going to crack down on insurance companies too. That is, if an insurance company gives quotas to companies that hire non-domiciled workers, just like brokers, there will be some penalties.
Rules against.
Well, in this case, I would divide the question into two. So, what's happening now and how do we see it going forward? That is, now we are getting a quota, but of course, there will be a period of time when the shutdown ends. When they adopt a real law, of course, it is clear that these drivers with such licenses, they will not be able to drive.
Now, at the moment, in Congress, in the Federal Congress, which specifically adopts laws, there are 4 bills that have been submitted, and they are aimed at different subjects, from non-domiciled drivers to knowledge of the English language, to make insurance companies take this seriously, and to set requirements so that shippers pay attention to it and refuse to release cargo to such drivers. And if they do, then they will be on the hook of legal battles. And this is what they are afraid of. Again, in fact, liability insurance is protection against legal battles. Everything is leading to this. Most likely it will all be adopted next year. Most likely somewhere, I think, by March.
By March 2026?
2026, yes. Maybe earlier, maybe later. I'm not Nostradamus, but knowing how quickly all these bills go through and so on, there will certainly be opposition. By the way, one of the people who sued DOT, a Russian driver.
We want to invite him.
It would be interesting, yes, to hear from him. He and the Mexican driver filed a lawsuit on behalf of the Teachers Association.
Very interesting. And some county from Washington State joined in.
So it will be interesting to see what comes of it. But usually, stopping this train is impossible because both houses of Congress and the White House are in the hands of one party. That is, accordingly, if the president has set it, and this comes from the highest level. The president instructed the Secretary of Transportation. The Secretary of Transportation, being a good minister, a bureaucrat, carries out an order. Congress is fully on the president's side. There's a kind of tightening of the screws.
Nothing will change.
No, nothing will change next year. Everything will be stricter, much stricter. Various additional laws will be adopted. Everything, of course, is heading in that direction. I can't please you with any news, but this once again shows that safety must be taken very seriously. Take it seriously.
Again, if we talk about the current situation right now, if we say someone is worried about something, much depends on the state. You need to understand where you're going. It's one thing to go to Florida, another thing, for example, to go to New York, especially in the current situation. That is, in one state, they will treat you one way, in another, they might turn a blind eye to something. Plus, you need to understand what a non-domiciled CDL is. That is, a CDL given to drivers who do not have citizenship or a green card. But this does not automatically mean that this person has violated something, because this person may be in a status, for example, as a refugee or some kind of asylum. That's one situation. So for such drivers at the moment, I don't know. Well, in Republican states, they probably should be afraid. But it's another thing that the same CDL can be held by a person who is illegally in the country. These are two different things. It's one thing to have a non-domiciled CDL, but you're legally in the country. And another thing to have the same story, no residence permit, no citizenship, but also no legal grounds for being in the country. These are different things. For such people, of course, it's the hardest right now, I'd say.
And, there's one, by the way, point that many don't talk about. The point is what is being done at the federal government level is very popular. It's very popular. Many, including trucking associations, support it. They want to reduce the number of drivers.
Increase cargo volumes.
Increase cargo volumes, indeed. So there are many interesting points here. Some do it out of xenophobia and migrantophobia, and some do it purely for economic reasons.
Eliminate the competition.
Eliminate the competition.
Eliminate small companies.
With the help of the federal government's hands.
Well, yes, that is when the government says it listens to the voice of the industry, to the voice of the driver. But where do these voices come from? They come from ATA.
No, not from the ATA. What's interesting is not from the ATA. They all think the ATA is on the side of immigrants. The ATA has not yet expressed a position. It comes from, this is the largest lobbying organization in trucking. But in second place as well, the organization called owner-operators. And it is precisely they who advocate for, despite being owner-operators, they are supposed to support the small truckers to help everyone. But they are categorically against it. They not only advocate in Congress for all these laws to be passed and for the DOT to tighten its regulations and rules, but they also want to file a lawsuit on the side of the government against what the Russian drivers filed. Very interesting.
Yes, interesting dynamics. On the other hand, when this rule was published, there is now a period until November 28th, during which comments can be left. A record number of comments have been submitted by people. Most of them are against it. You can tell who these people are by their names. As I understand it, from the provider's side, insurance hasn't yet taken any preventive measures, right?
So far, nothing from the biggest ones yet. Nothing yet. There is, however, if you live or work in Florida, for some reason, the state of Florida, including the largest companies like Progressive, has started to treat this more suspiciously. They require more information about drivers and so on. But they haven't started refusing yet. It hasn't come to that. So I think this year, the calendar year, will end calmly. Therefore, there is still time for those who plan to get insurance. Get insurance now so that at least you have this year with a policy. And then hopefully something will happen. You'll be able to get either citizenship, a green card, an H-2B visa, and so on, an investment visa, and then you might get a CDL.
This is the most direct path. If a person was in the country legally and they have such a CDL, then an investment visa is kind of an option to resort to and continue working so that this non-domiciled CDL will be valid. So they made H2A, H2B, and E2. But the first two visas are related to the employer.
Hard to get?
Hard to get.
This is for agriculture, for farmers.
First, yes, H2A is for agriculture. H2B is mainly for the technology sector.
But there you depend on the employer. Someone has to sponsor you. And E2, it's like you depend on yourself, on some other nuances.
So you're saying that if we take the quota now and it continues for a whole year, there's a chance to get insurance after this year?
To come through, check.
Of course, there's a chance, but unlikely. But the chance, of course, is there. Of course. That is, the insurance company at any moment has the right to do this, just as they have the right to audit at any moment. So that's exactly what your question was about.
Yes, we conduct such audits precisely on insurance. That is, we help our clients be prepared. If they are our clients, then they already have everything initially.
But this is a very, yes, delicate moment right now.
Very. Many people are simply not ready for this, especially if they have an unscheduled policy, revenue-based, for example. And suddenly an audit is conducted, and then the insurance company demands additional money. And our people are very surprised. Like, how come I paid you, for example, $1 million for a large fleet? They are told yes, but that was based on the assumption that your revenue would be, I don't know, 50 million, but in reality, you have 100 million in revenue. So come on, pay another million.
Big surprise there, big million.
Yes, it's very interesting.
Now, in general, yes, the dynamics in trucking are very fast, rapid. I mean, there have been ups and downs, but now there are really big changes happening. What we are saying now and what we will see in March, we can only speculate.
So has anything changed significantly now, or is it practically the same in terms of the number of drivers you insure?
I mean, how much have the companies lost in terms of drivers? I mean, what percentage?
I'll give you an example. Yesterday, Al and I were at a company. They have 250 trucks. And the owner of the company said that he has 100 trucks are idle. I asked why so. And the first response was he could have named various reasons, but he said they are afraid to drive.
And he's not the only one. We have several clients who have either suffered from this themselves or they tell stories about their fellows and so on, whose statistics are even more depressing. That is, we're talking about almost more than 90% of their fleet just being idle, and they don't know what to do. Indeed, it's a very difficult situation. I actually wanted to touch on one point there. In fact, this trend is not related to safety. That is, initially the DOT, when they released this rule, they tried to cover it up by saying, oh, there were 5 fatal accidents, all caused by non-domiciled drivers, so we made this emergency rule because of that. But if you look, there are several thousand accidents a year. And these accidents, these 5 accidents, and then a 6th one happened, that's less than 1%. It's even less than 0.1%. So blaming poor immigrants for somehow worsening road safety is absolutely incorrect. That's absolutely not the case. On the contrary, many immigrants come here with a lot of experience driving Kamaz trucks. Try putting any driver behind the wheel of a Kamaz.
And also handcuffs.
Yes. Or maybe in Belazi, right? Let them try to drive something like this without hydraulics and so on.
Our Belarusian theme, the Belarusian automobile plant.
That's why you come here, and you should be the king in managing American trucks.
Yes, it's very sad.
The FMSCA themselves admitted that they cannot find any connections.
They have it somewhere in the center, in the middle.
They changed their perspective and say that the states have no way to check the driving record of immigrants, and obviously there are objections. Why not? Have you tried?
Have you tried? Yes.
There are actually, you can get international MVRs, but most importantly, it's clear that if a person got behind the wheel of a truck, started driving it confident, it's obvious. The person drove Kamaz trucks on much narrower roads, on much more difficult roads, yes. In the third world, of course, he will be able to drive on much wider roads. Here in the USA, these wonderful Volvos are driven just like regular cars.
Yes, it's very frustrating that drivers who honestly pass their CDL, who are genuinely good drivers and pay taxes in this country, find themselves in such a situation.
Such a situation. Many schools will also be closing now. CDL schools, they will go after them. They will go after the people who graduated from these schools. Audits and checks are happening on all fronts and so on.
So, does that mean pressure on insurance companies is also possible?
I think it will be. I think next year will contain all of this.
Is next year the scariest?
Yes, I think next year will be quite challenging. You just have to get through it. I think many will manage to get through it, and the year 27 is going to be.
But in the trucking industry, there are always ups and downs.
Yes, it's not scary, it's just a turning point. So to speak,
We'll break down a little.
We've been through this about 4 times already, through these cycles. That is down, and then eventually everything goes up, then down again, and so on. It's going down now, but eventually, of course, it will go up.
plus, again, not all the things that happen are negative. For example, when a driver doesn't speak English, it's obvious that it affects safety. Therefore, if the law is passed, there are certain advantages, so to speak, in this case. We will look at the positives.
Yes.
God willing.
And finally, I would like to ask you, what would you advise our listeners to avoid problems with this new legislation? How do they stay in business now? That's the first thing. And secondly, what needs to be done to save, not to save, but to get a good insurance rate and not go out of business, so that you have money to pay, so that this rate is not 8 times higher or even twice as high as usual?
Well, first of all, of course, when a person starts a business, they need to start with proper safety. That is ideally, let's say, when people start a business with 1 or 2 trucks, no one hires someone on a salary because to pay for safety, you need at least 10, roughly speaking. First and foremost, we would recommend reaching out to the right company, AIST Safety, immediately. And even if the company is not just starting out but has been in business for some time, it's important to get a second opinion before renewal. Everyone has their own safety measures. And while everyone thinks they know how to do things, a second opinion is always valuable. Plus, there are some things that the insurance or safety company can help with to influence the rate. And plus, of course, the right insurance agent and broker, because different people have different opportunities to do something and different attitudes towards the person who comes to you. And accordingly, the key factor is the driver. In other words, a driver is a figure who can ruin a company with 20 to 30 trucks. So it's not worth chasing quantity. Attention should be paid to quality from the driver's perspective. It's better to hire 1 or 2 rather than 5 who will eventually lead to some consequences because everything can be considered, for example, from the company's perspective, from the business perspective, from the insurance perspective. But one driver can become the limiting factor for everything. The human factor is very important.
Absolutely right. I would also advise learning English. Now, it's absolutely very important. It will help you in life, in any business. And of course, pay attention to safety from the very first days. It shouldn't be an afterthought. And the same goes for working with the right brokers and agents. And everything will be fine for you. That is, this is a business that still remains one of the most profitable businesses. It will remain so, but everything just needs to be built correctly from the start. Don't approach this from the perspective of some immediate gain, and don't hire a driver you know has a terrible record. Why doing that? Don't do that.
And they stop when the driver usually has an accent or poor English. That's when, regarding English, it triggers an additional inspection. So they can find out that you're non-domiciled and that the lookbook is bad. So it all comes down to your speech, how well you can communicate.
Absolutely right. As with everything, we have one client who has a large fleet, an excellent safety record. Excellent safety record. And in August, DOT stopped one of the trucks and immediately gave it 20 violations. I've just never seen anything like it myself. 20 violations.
Apparently, he really angered the inspector.
Yes, it made him very angry just because the driver spoke poor English. But he spoke, so he didn't write him up, didn't give that citation. But out of those 20 violations, 12 were out of service.
That's very detrimental.
Yes, sad, very sad.
Neither the law nor these regulations specify the level at which you must know this English language. There's no standard like TOEFL, for example. There's no specific number of points. It's all absolutely subjective. Someone just didn't like you and they say you have an accent, that's it. You speak English poorly.
We usually counter such violations,
Meaning we check if there were any, well, not all of them, of course, if they are legitimate, meaning if there was a good inspection or a bad one, but it wasn't for English, then we can try to address them.
But everything you said is very important, valuable information, advice.
Make sure to use it because you need to be transparent and honest in this industry and you must follow the law because in
America.
everyone must follow the law.
No way out of it. And most importantly, work with good, reliable professionals, an insurance agent and an insurance broker. Who else?
Underwriters.
Yes.
And information about our
Guests we will place below in the description, where you will also find the website.
Of course, thank you for the wonderful conversation. And finally, we also got to see from the inside how AIST operates. We've heard a lot. We know how well it works.
Well, I have for about 10 years already. 10 as I see, right?
Thank you. Yes, we've been working with you for a long time. It's very nice that you came to us.
Thank you. Thank you for a ton of valuable information. I think our listeners, viewers, and readers will appreciate it. I personally found it very interesting.
Me too. I learned a lot, by the way. I found out a lot of interesting things about zip codes and about state insurance. It was interesting.